to listen. I'm really excited to tell you about my trip to Africa. I say Africa as a continent because I went to 3 different countries. I visited Ghana in West Africa, and then travelled to East Africa to Tanzania, and then I later went down to South Africa, which I stayed for quite a long time, but I'll talk about each one separately. So I went with an organisation called Plan My Gap Year, whose mission is kind of to make travel available to young people on a budget, and you have the opportunity to volunteer either in a school or on a safari sort of location. I chose the education side, the school side, as that suits my interests better. I'll start with Ghana because it seems like a logical place to start. I began my journey in Ghana, where I started in the capital city, Accra, and travelled. It was a very long flight, and then I travelled 7 hours on the bus to Kumasi, where we stayed for the next 3 weeks. That was quite stressful because it was the first time I've ever travelled alone. But once I got there, I met my group, and we became really close instantly, really. And I'm still friends with all of them now. We stayed at I forgot to do this actually. So it's just a few pictures of life in Ghana. That was Kumasi, so these are all my own pictures. That's the market, that's the biggest market in West Africa. We spent a lot of time just wandering around, exploring. As you can imagine, you can spend hours and hours and you won't see everything. But the volunteer house was lovely. We spent time with a local family. This was amazing because it allowed us to see things that you probably wouldn't be able to see if you travelled alone. So this is Mimi. She's the daughter of Seth, who ran the programme in Ghana. So we spent a lot of time just with the family, which was really lovely, and I learned a lot from them. Our first night was spent making a local dish called fufu, which is traditionally made by beating cassava, which is like a starchy vegetable, mostly eaten in West Africa. And you eat it with your fingers with like stew and So that's a picture of us beating the cassava, and it makes like this stretchy stuff. It was very difficult, and they have a lot of strength. I tried it, and I was rubbish. Some of my favourite times were just spent wandering around the markets and things. There was a mango lady just to the right of this picture, and she sold mangoes for 3p, like the equivalent of 3p. So I went every day, bought about 7 mangoes. I've never eaten so many mangoes in my life. And then our orientation day was just spent exploring or learning about Ashanti culture, which is in Kumasi. They're famous for their textiles, particularly kente clothing, which you can see in this picture. So they weave really intricate designs, and that's what most people wear over there. I actually bought like a tapestry. We learned a few local words. So their language is called Twi. So Madase means thank you, Akwaba means you're welcome. So just a few of those words to communicate with the people in the markets and things showed that you were really interested in their culture. So in terms of the actual volunteering, I was placed at a school which was also a nursery, so I had a chance to spend time with both. I particularly enjoyed the older children, so they went up to 15, 16 years of age. And when I helped in the nursery, I was just feeding, trying to keep the peace really, because the rooms were very small, dusty, very hot, like extremely hot. And for babies, they got really aggy with each other. A lot of like fighting. The little babies would just beat each other up sometimes. So that was kind of my job to keep the peace. But I really enjoyed teaching English to the younger ones. There was about 70 plus kids, so this is the nursery area. They only had swings and a little roundabout. And there were a lot of special needs kids, so in the right-hand bottom corner, that was Jennifer. She had Down syndrome. But there were also a couple of other special needs kids, and that is my particular interest because I currently work in a special needs school, and so I was interested in that, and I asked the teacher what are some of their diagnoses, and she just said Down syndrome, and I spent time with 4 of the kids, and only Jennifer had Down syndrome. And I know I'm not a doctor or anything, but it doesn't take much to realise that some of them had like ADHD, autism, and it was a shame because most of those kids spent time just on the ground outside the classroom because the teachers didn't understand their needs, why they weren't understanding the lessons and things. So I spent a lot of time with Jennifer just like calming her down most of the time, but also in a calm environment outside where it wasn't hot and horrible. So yeah, that was my favourite part of this school. So my favourite was the Year 7 class. Oh, yeah, so this was my class. I taught them lots of English. They were very bright and they really enjoyed a challenge. They were very excited when we came up with incorrect grammar sentences, and they found it very funny because they thought it was funny that we'd got mistakes wrong. So they could then correct them for us, and that was our way of giving them a bit of purpose, and they felt like they'd really learned something. And they were just amazing. I loved them. I also taught them RE, which was quite difficult because they teach in Ghana that there are 3 religious groups: Christianity, Muslim and traditional. So obviously quite different to what we believe here. The traditional, I don't know if anyone's heard of it before, but they believe in like power of ancestors. They perform libation, so they pour alcohol to their dead relatives, and they believe that they have a connection to the dead. So I was trying to teach something that I don't personally like. You know, I wouldn't be taught that at home, so I found it very difficult. But yeah, that was just part of my role. Most of the classes were Christian. 71% of Ghana are Christian. And obviously, being a Christian myself, I was interested to see how it's different over there, how it's similar. Playground games often involve Christian songs, so they taught me one, if I can get this to work. Yeah, so it just goes on and on, but it just gives you an idea. They were always singing, always dancing. They loved music like me, and faith was very, very important to them. They really were very expressive about their faith, and loving music myself, I wanted to go and visit a church. So I visited a church in Ghana, and the church was very, very well built compared to how I imagined it to be. Obviously there were smaller ones as well, but I just went with someone from the family. A lot of gospel music, so I'm just going to play a bit to show you, so you can get the gist of what it's like. Yeah, that was one of my favourite days in Ghana. I just loved the music was amazing. Very, very different to how we worship at home. But I loved it, and I loved how they weren't afraid to express their faith, which I sometimes think we are here. I also did a lot of singing at the house. So this is Mimi and Diane. They were part of the family we were staying with. They taught me a little song. of moments like that where Diane would just come to me and go, we need to learn this song, and then she wrote them down for me, so I kept them all, but I remember them all anyway. They were some of my most favourite times in Ghana, just getting to know the family super well, and also Mimi was very aware of her faith already, which was, we had so many chats that I wouldn't be able to have with an adult here sometimes, I think, and she was amazing. This was Mole National Park, so I just thought I'd show a few things that we did other than volunteering. So again, these are my pictures from, we saw lots of wild elephants, monkeys. We visited a local community about 2 hours from the national park, and they were a long way from other communities, so it was just them, and then they had a freshwater pump about 20 minutes away, so you can see them carry water from that. And we also had a go. Again, I was absolutely rubbish at this. I look happy in that, but I'm struggling so much. But they must have very strong necks, is all I can say. It was very difficult. A few pictures from Mole. We got the opportunity to, we pooled a lot of money together, and then we were able to buy and make 200 portions of food. So this was like rice and like cheap meats and stuff. We took them down to the local mosque where lots of orphans and like mums and babies would gather, because PMGY, the company, they encourage volunteers to do this weekly. So it's become almost an expectation that they know they'll get their food, and that is sometimes the only meal they'll have, like proper meal, apart from sort of stealing here and there and things. Which is, it's very sad, and it was so overwhelming, because 200 meals sounds like a lot, but we got there and there was just like 5 times the number of people than we had to feed, than we had food. So you could, as we drove away, you could just see them all hanging on our car and like trying to roll the windows down, because obviously they were absolutely distraught that they didn't get the meals they wanted. But we did make some difference, but I just wish, like in some cases when there's more volunteers, obviously they were able to make more food, but it's just the way it happened. But it was eye-opening and very, very overwhelming. A few pictures from life in Ghana. This was Cape Coast, so the last bit of Ghana was a visit to the coast. We visited a slave castle dungeon, where we learnt about the slaves in Ghana from the 17th to the 19th century, before they were shipped off to mostly Brazil and the Caribbean, but actually nearly half of them died on the route, so we were able to walk through where they would be staying. And then that brings me on to Tanzania. This is still Ghana, but this was my last night in Ghana, and then I left at like 1 a.m. and got on the plane to Tanzania, where we stayed in Arusha. So I was placed in a daycare. Oh, this is just a few pictures of life in Tanzania. So some hot springs, Maasai people, which I'll talk about more after. Lots of art, very beautiful artwork everywhere. Lots of monkeys. And then more monkeys, but of different kinds. I was at a daycare. I spent time feeding, preparing porridge, planning basic maths activities like counting to 1 to 15 to 20. The classrooms were even smaller than Ghana, with the same amount of children. And we felt that with these kids it was less important to teach them and more important to just give them enjoyment. So we actually bought them a speaker and we spent the day sometimes just dancing and singing, because they just needed that like safe space, I think. There was a song called Kui Kui which I could recite in my sleep, I think, because we just played it over and over and over. Yeah, that's just us eating our lunch. I also had porridge for my lunch, so I spent the day with them. You can see they love the speaker. We left it with them and they ate it. We did a lot of colouring. They mostly learnt through colouring, so we'd draw the thing they were trying to learn out, like a number, and they'd colour it in, just so they could learn the shapes of numbers and things. You've probably heard of the Maasai people, found in East Africa around Kenya and Tanzania. Obviously I was in Tanzania, so we got to experience their culture very closely. We were lucky enough to be able to visit the Maasai market, which is in the top right picture. They basically sell cattle and sheep for goods like food and clothes. It was a sensory overload, to say the least. It was an incredible experience, but it's something I've never seen before. And then we travelled to their actual village. There was loads, but we were able to go with a guide who was a past Maasai member. He was actually granted permission to leave to promote tourism for people like me to see the Maasai culture. Usually you wouldn't be allowed to leave the village. If you did, you wouldn't be accepted back in because it's seen as like a betrayal to your family almost. But this again was something just out of this world that I've never seen anything like it before. The Maasai men aspire to become warriors by killing a lion, and then they have to bring back the parts of the lion. This was the village we went to visit. So they were in amongst all wild animals. Pretty scary actually. They said they actually sometimes wake up to like prides of lion and things. But yeah, I don't know if you can see this at all, but it's a picture that he showed us, the chief leader showed us, of his success of killing a lion. So he has this scar which they're branded with when they succeed to show their power. But basically you can see the paw of the lion on the spear, and they bring it back to their community to show them that they've succeeded, basically. And that's his scar. He didn't speak any English, but he wanted to show us the pictures and things. So yeah, that was really eye-opening. He was a bit like a celebrity, really. Everyone sort of knew of his name. Some of the practices are very old-fashioned in Maasai culture. One of them that absolutely shocked me was men are circumcised at 14 to signify like manhood, and if they show any sign of pain, they are speared by their father because it shows weakness and they're not allowed to live in that community anymore. And I thought, no way does that still happen, but the people still do that. And also women at 14 are circumcised, but we would call it like FGM, female genital mutilation, which is actually illegal to Tanzanian government, but because of the Maasai people moving around all the time, they're so difficult to govern. So yeah, that was shocking really, and a lot of the girls did tell us about it, so yeah. And then we went on a safari. Obviously we were volunteering, but I just wanted to show some of the things again that we did without, like when we weren't volunteering. So our days finished about 2 p.m. and we were able to do, like, explore where we were staying. These are just some of my pictures from the journey to the safari. The picture in the top right hand corner, I don't know if some of you can see it at the back, but it's the Maasai people, just that one community, so that's kind of how small it was, and that was in the middle of absolutely nowhere. This was Ngorongoro Crater, so we went to Lake Manyara, Ngorongoro Crater and Tarangire National Park for 3 days, and I'll just show you some of the pictures. So we drove up the crater and then into the crater, and then spent the day just exploring around. And I've never done a safari like this, where you could see for miles, you could just see the animals roaming around. Usually they're hidden, but it was incredible. There's some little giraffes in the corner. Some of the Maasai things. That was a church just on the road in the middle of nowhere. So I wondered where the people were that go to this church. But yeah, it was interesting to see where they worship. I managed to go to Zanzibar. I won't talk too much about it because it was kind of a little staycation in Tanzania. But we took an hour flight to Zanzibar. We were actually there at the time of Ramadan. So 99% of Zanzibar are Muslim. So Ramadan was super, super important to them. So we obviously had to respect it. So no restaurants were open in the day, but in the night the streets sort of came to life. Everyone broke the fast. We really enjoyed walking around the night markets and tasting all the different foods. But we did snorkeling, lots of Maasai people, still loads of culture. It was like a holiday, but also super, we learned loads. Swimming with dolphins. That was our tour guide, he was so cool. This was Stone Town, so we stayed here in the last couple of days. Very different, very historical. It's called Stone Town because everything's built of stone, and it's really beautiful. Yeah, so that was my time in Zanzibar. Oh, I did a skydive too. I actually forgot about that, but yeah. It was amazing. An amazing place to do it because the view was just unreal. And that brings me to the last destination, which was South Africa. I only intended to stay in Cape Town for 3 weeks, but ended up extending my South Africa trip because I realised that there wasn't enough time to see everything I wanted to see. So, yeah, South Africa is generally a lot more westernised than I think most people realise, because I told people I was going to Africa and you have this general idea, but Cape Town was completely different. But the reason it's so westernised is because it's colonial history. So we learnt a lot in South Africa and we wanted to make sure we experienced everything we could. I'll get to the history in a minute. But the school I was at was a lot more affluent than the other two. Well, at first glance it was. We were placed in a primary school, and instead of teaching this time, we asked permission to paint the new primary school building. It was really ugly, to put it lightly. And a lot of the kids came from townships, so they needed this safe, sort of welcoming environment. And we wanted to make it look more welcoming, really. So we bought loads of wall paint, and we just asked permission to paint the playground with like colourful games and obstacle courses that they could do. And the kids loved it once it was dry. And we painted some of the classrooms as well. So that was actually more help to them than us teaching, because they had qualified teachers. Whereas in the other countries, I think teaching English was beneficial because the teachers themselves didn't speak very good English. Here, their English was better, so it was more beneficial for us to do something like this. So townships in South Africa, I'll go back to that, but townships in South Africa are small communities of people forced to live in appalling conditions, really, in like tiny tin houses very packed together. And I instantly felt a difference in South Africa between the disparity of rich and poor. The other two countries, they were sort of on a level playing field with the same level of poverty, whereas South Africa, you could turn a corner and see these townships, and then next door, beautiful resorts. Kind of made you feel a bit guilty, but me and my friend Anna, we decided to see as much as we could of the other side of South Africa, as well as Cape Town, which is quite catered towards tourists. But diseases spread very quickly, and drug and alcohol abuse is a massive problem in the townships as well, but I'll get to that a bit later as well. After placement, we explored Cape Town with trips like these ones. We went to Boulders Beach, so they have penguins on the beach. I did not know this, but it's pretty cool. Camps Bay, which is the beach, lots of hiking and vineyards, amongst other things. I also paraglided over, oh, that's me hiking. I look really happy in this picture, but it was terrifying. We actually accidentally did a hike that you were supposed to pay £80 for a tour guide to help you with, but we just ended up scaling the side of Table Mountain and got very lost. But we managed to survive, so I look really happy, but I'm actually not. We paraglided over the city. That was amazing. You could see everything. I loved Cape Town, but coming from West and East Africa, it was a massive shock to the system, and city life quickly became intense. So me and my friend Anna decided we needed a break. So at the point where I was supposed to go home, I hired a car with her, and we drove from Cape Town all the way to Port Elizabeth along the coast and through the mountains. And stopped. So it was over about 2-3 weeks, and stopped at little destinations along the way. So that's a couple of the views we saw. She got really annoyed at me because I kept stopping the car to just take pictures of the views. But how can you not? Because it's so beautiful. These are some of the little destinations we visited. We actually ate some ostrich, and it was delicious. Best meat I've ever eaten.
Oh, wow.
This was an elephant sanctuary we went to, like an ethical elephant sanctuary. They were rescued from the wild, actually from the safari park. That's the really famous one, Kruger. So they were rescued from Kruger for like people were hunting them, and a wildcat sanctuary. That was amazing too. So they're not really they're fenced in, but the area of land they're given is absolutely huge. A few natural walks, lots and lots of seal pods. We did kayaking, mountain climbing. And then the last sort of part of my trip, I'm aware I'm going really on and on, but it might surprise some people to hear that Johannesburg was actually my favourite part of the trip. Me and Anna were met with a lot of judgment when we said that we were gonna. We basically made a rash decision to just fly to Joburg, and it was the best decision ever. People were like, "Do not go. It's terrifying. You're two female solo travellers. That's a horrible idea." But in the end, it was actually incredible. A little bit scary at times, but it would be. But Joburg is the home of Nelson Mandela and the heart of South Africa's history, really, of the apartheid, where South Africa was taken over by the whites, such as the Dutch and us, the British. The system existed officially from 1948 to 1994. However, it's not finished. It still happens. It's not really history. It was only 30 years ago. So the effects of it is long lasting. It's so obvious as soon as you step foot in South Africa, the effects of the apartheid. So we were really lucky to visit the Apartheid Museum, so that's where I got most of the information from. But also just to see it in real life was incredible. We were actually lucky enough to visit Soweto, the southwestern township, which is the biggest township in South Africa, with a population of over 1 million people. So there is question as to whether it is a township, because they're usually quite small. But approximately 50% of the population of South Africa actually live in townships, and we felt it was so important to see one, and it's generally quite dangerous to go alone. So we found a local sort of touring group that encourage healthy tourism to try and break the divide between townships and like people who live like us. We were shown around the township. We began on Vilakazi Street, where Nelson Mandela lived. This isn't actually the street, but we went to his house, learnt a lot about it. It's become quite famous for the street where the police riots happened. Hundreds of South Africans were killed, including school children, in their fight for freedom. Even children that didn't know what was happening, they were shot down. And yeah, it was incredible to see the street, and there are a few tourists there, but Johannesburg is a lot less touristy, so we quite enjoyed just spending time with the locals. And during the height of the apartheid, a new language from the Dutch, Afrikaans, was taught, so the children were forced to learn in Afrikaans, which was a foreign language to them. They'd never heard it before, they didn't understand anything. So this was just one strategy to like marginalise South African people amongst so many. But that shocked me really, because imagine trying to learn something that you don't even understand the language. We got to walk through the back streets of the townships with the locals, so we felt safe, and actually people were so welcoming. We were shocked to see children with no homes, and the most impactful thing I think I saw there was a set of really beautiful brick houses opposite this street here, it's literally behind me. so Nelson Mandela had formed an initiative to build 1 million houses by 1999, and he didn't quite fulfill it, but he did make a big difference in housing lots of homeless South Africans. But the government, again to try and marginalise South African people, they said in the end that South Africans had to pay for these houses. So it was originally said that they could have them for free because they were unemployed with families, but they then were told that they actually had to pay, which none of them could do because they were unemployed. So none of these houses, I think there was about 80 behind us, and we said, like, who lives here? Just like off as a conversation. And he said that they're empty, they've never been opened, which is just such a waste. And you can imagine how angry they feel just waking up and telling their families that they have to live here still and that nobody lives there, because they could have housed all these people. So seeing that really like made it clearer why there's so much hostility in South Africa compared to other African countries, and I think people just put it down to it's a dangerous country, but actually it's kind of our fault. It's the colonialisation was the problem, and they're very, very angry still, which is understandable because they were pushed out of their own country. So yeah, the unfairness of it all made it much easier to understand. And wandering through the streets, this was the township. We actually weren't allowed to visit this bit. This is like the most extreme level. There was literally no gap between the houses. Pretty dangerous. But again, they're real people. And wandering through the streets of Soweto in the evening was really beautiful. We played football with some boys the same age as us from the township, who told us that they hate how scared people are of where they live. They spoke very little English, but we got the gist of what they were trying to say. And they said they went to school, which was funded by Nelson Mandela's charity. In places like this, they still had very small schools. So they went to school, they have hobbies, and whilst they clearly did understand their area was dangerous at times, they expressed how grateful they were that we stopped and chatted to them and made them feel human, really, because we were a bit sceptical of doing a tour of the Soweto at first because we didn't want to feel like we were just watching from a window, but actually it was brilliant. We got to get out and talk to the community. So yeah, that was actually one of the highlights of my Africa trip. Compared to everything else I did, that like the skydive was amazing, but actually that day was the highlight because it really impacted me and showed me that I think people have this preconceived idea of this dangerous country, but actually taking the risk to visit such a notoriously dangerous community of people really was the highlight of my trip. So thank you so much for listening, and if you have any questions I'm happy to answer. I hope you learned something today. Over a bit, I'm really sorry, but there was just too much to say and I really struggled to even get it to that, so sorry if you had to go. I'm happy if people want to leave, but if you want to ask me questions, I'm here. So, yeah.
The drive down to Port Elizabeth,
yeah.
There were just two of you, and presumably that was a safer thing to do than...
Not really, actually. Me and Anna weighed up our options, so you could pay for a tourist bus, and they would drive you around all the different places and stop at planned destinations. But we decided that after speaking to some people who'd done it, it was very expensive. You didn't get as much out of it because we could just stop wherever we wanted. And while it might have been a bit stupid of us to do what we didn't get into harm's way. So I suppose it was amazing for me. It was a bit risky because carjacking is quite a big problem in South Africa, but I just drove really fast, to be honest. There were some hairy moments where I just was like, ah! But overall, driving in South Africa is the same here as it is, as it was over there, on the same side of the road. So the driving wasn't the problem, but I was a bit wary of certain things that can happen along the way. Anybody else? Or? Thank you so much.